Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Mercy's Light, watching the stars move slowly past the massive viewports. The hospital ship was enormous, stretching almost 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its white hull gleamed in the starlight, marked with red crosses and medical symbols from dozens of different worlds. This was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, a place where anyone could come for healing, no matter what species they were or which side of the war they fought on. Elena had been the ship's chief medical officer for 5 years now. She was a small woman with dark hair that she always kept tied back and gentle brown eyes that had seen too much suffering. At 38, she was young to command such an important vessel, but the Galactic Council had learned that humans had a special talent for medicine. They could adapt their treatments to work on almost any alien species, something that amazed the other races. The Mercy's Light was currently in the Vega sector, one of the most dangerous areas of space. For 3 years, the Galactic Council and the Zaphirian Empire had been fighting a brutal war. Millions had died on both sides. The Zaphirians were a proud reptilian race who believed they should rule the galaxy. They had powerful weapons and fierce warriors, but they had made one big mistake. They had attacked a council medical station 2 years ago, and that had brought humanity into the war. Humans were still new to galactic politics. They had only joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago, when their first ships had reached the stars. Most of the older races thought humans were weak and primitive. They had no special powers like the psychic Altarians, no great strength like the rock-skinned Gorons, and no advanced technology like the machine-loving Synthoids. But humans had something else. They could understand and help almost any living creature. "Dr. Vasquez," called Commander Sarah Torres from her station. Sarah was the ship's defensive coordinator, a tough woman with short black hair and scars on her hands from her years as a Marine. "We're getting a transmission from the Council base on Kepler 442b. They're requesting immediate medical assistance." Elena walked over to Sarah's console. The message was urgent. A Council patrol had been attacked by Zaphirian raiders near the planet. There were survivors, but they needed help fast. Elena nodded without hesitation. "Set course for Kepler 442b. Maximum safe speed," she ordered. "Send word to all departments to prepare for incoming casualties." The bridge crew moved quickly to carry out her orders. Elena felt a familiar mix of excitement and worry. This was what they did. They saved lives. It didn't matter if the wounded were humans, Altarians, or even Zaphirians. The laws of medical sanctuary were sacred to every civilized race in the galaxy. These laws said that hospital ships, medical stations, and anyone wearing medical symbols could not be attacked. They were neutral in all conflicts. Dr. Marcus Chen appeared at Elena's side. He was her chief of xenobiology, a brilliant man who understood alien anatomy better than almost anyone in the galaxy. Marcus was tall and thin, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Elena's friend since their days at the Mars Medical Academy. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. "Bad enough," Elena replied. "Council patrol ship, heavy damage, unknown casualties. Could be anything from a dozen injured to hundreds dead." Marcus nodded grimly. They had seen both scenarios too many times. "I'll prep the main medical bay and alert the surgical teams. Do we know what species were on the patrol ship?" "Mixed crew," Sarah called out from her station. "Humans, Altarians, and at least 3 Gorons according to the manifest." Elena felt a small sense of relief. Those were species they knew well. Treating unknown alien races was always more difficult and dangerous. Every species had different biology, different reactions to medicines, and different ways their bodies healed. Humans seemed to have an instinct for figuring out these differences, but it still took time and careful study. The Mercy's Light changed course and began accelerating toward Kepler 442b. Elena walked through the ship's corridors, checking on the preparations. The medical bays were huge spaces filled with beds, surgical equipment, and tanks containing dozens of different healing fluids. Human doctors and nurses worked alongside medical staff from 6 other species, all wearing the same white uniforms, with red medical crosses. In the pediatric ward, Elena stopped to check on some of their current patients. There were 43 children from 7 different worlds, all victims of the war. A young Altarian girl with pale blue skin and large silver eyes smiled at Elena as she walked past. The girl had lost her parents in a Zaphirian bombing attack, but the trauma counselor said she was getting better. "Dr. Elena!" called a small voice. Elena turned to see Tommy Harrison, a 6-year-old human boy whose colony ship had been attacked 3 months ago. His parents had died protecting the main civilian transport, but Tommy had been badly injured and was still recovering. "Are we going to help more people?" Elena knelt down beside his bed and smiled. "Yes, Tommy. That's what we do. We help people who are hurt." "Even the bad guys?" Tommy asked with the innocent curiosity of a child. Elena paused. It was a question that came up often, especially from the human crew members. "There are no bad guys in a medical bay," she said gently. "Only people who need help." Tommy seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to playing with his toy spaceship. Elena continued her rounds, checking on wounded Zaphirian prisoners who were recovering from their injuries. Even here, the reptilian soldiers were treated with the same care as everyone else. Some of them looked surprised by this kindness. The Zaphirian military taught that other species were inferior and unworthy of mercy. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All hands, prepare for hyperspace exit in 30 minutes. Medical teams to emergency stations." Elena made her way back to the bridge. Through the viewports, she could see the swirling colors of hyperspace beginning to fade as they approached. Normal space. The stars slowly came back into focus, and ahead of them was Kepler 442b, a green and blue world that looked almost like Earth. "Contact established with the Council base," reported Lieutenant Kim Park, the communications officer. "They're sending us the coordinates of the attack site." "Any word on survivors?" Elena asked. "Some, but the base lost contact with the patrol ship 6 hours ago. They're afraid the worst." Elena nodded grimly. In space, losing contact usually meant total destruction, but sometimes, if they were lucky, it just meant damaged communications equipment. The Mercy's light moved toward the coordinates, its powerful sensors scanning for any signs of life. "Got something," called Ensign Rodriguez from the sensor station. "Debris field, but I'm reading life signs. Looks like 15, maybe 20. Survivors in an escape pod." "Just one pod?" Sarah asked with concern. "That's all I'm seeing." "Wait." Rodriguez frowned at his displays. "There's something else. A ship badly damaged but still intact." "It's... Oh no." "What is it?" Elena demanded. "It's a Zaphirian cruiser, heavily damaged, drifting. I'm reading multiple life signs aboard." The bridge fell silent. Elena felt her stomach tighten. A Zaphirian ship in the same area where a council patrol had been attacked could mean many things, none of them good. But as she looked at the readings, she could see that the alien ship was badly hurt too. Its power levels were dropping, and there were clear signs of hull breaches. "Orders, Doctor?" Sarah asked quietly. Elena stared at the tactical display showing both the council survivors and the damaged Zaphirian ship. The laws of medical sanctuary were clear. She had to help anyone who needed medical aid, regardless of who they were or what they had done. But she could also see the concern on her crew's faces. Helping enemy soldiers was one thing when they were prisoners brought aboard other ships. Going to rescue them directly from a battle site was something else entirely. "We respond to both." "Distress calls," Elena said firmly. "Prep 2 shuttle teams. We'll recover the council survivors first, then assess the situation with the Zaphirian vessel." "Doctor," Commander Torres said carefully, "that Zaphirian ship could be a trap. Their weapons might still be functional." Then we'll be careful, Elena replied. But we don't leave wounded people to die in space, Sarah. That's not who we are. Sarah nodded, though Elena could see she wasn't happy about it. Understood. I'll have the shuttle bays prepared and increase our defensive readiness. The next hour passed quickly as they recovered the Council survivors. 15 people had made it to the escape pod, 8 humans, 4 Altarians, and 3 Gorons. All were injured, some severely, but Elena's medical teams went to work immediately. The survivors told a grim story of a surprise attack by Zaphirian raiders who had hit them while they were investigating reports of illegal mining operations. With the Council survivors safely aboard and being treated, Elena turned her attention to the damaged Zaphirian cruiser. Long-range scans showed that the ship had taken severe damage from what looked like a reactor explosion. There were 47 life signs aboard, many of them weak. "Send them a message," Elena ordered. "Tell them we're a medical vessel and we're here to offer assistance." Lieutenant Park sent the message, but there was no response. The Zaphirian ship drifted silently in space, its communications either damaged or deliberately shut off. But she also understood that Elena was right. This was what they did. They saved lives. "Fine," Sarah said finally. "But you take a full security escort, and you're back here at the first sign of trouble." Elena nodded and headed for the shuttle bay. As she walked through the corridors, she passed the recovering Council survivors. Some of them watched her go with expressions of disbelief. They couldn't understand why she would risk helping the same people who had just tried to kill them. In the shuttle bay, Elena joined a team of 6 medical specialists and 4 security officers. As their shuttle launched toward the Zaphirian ship, she thought about the laws of medical sanctuary and what they really meant. They weren't just rules written down in some ancient treaty. They were a promise that no matter how dark the galaxy became, there would always be places where compassion mattered more than conflict. The shuttle docked with the Zaphirian cruiser's emergency airlock. Elena was the first one through, carrying her medical scanner and a universal translator. The air inside the ship was thin and filled with smoke, but it was breathable. Emergency lighting cast red shadows on the metal walls. They found the first group of survivors in what looked like a medical bay. 12 Zaphirian soldiers, all badly injured, lay on crude stretchers. When they saw Elena and her team, their large yellow eyes went wide with surprise and fear. One of them, an officer with scarred scales and a damaged arm, tried to sit up. You are human," he said in heavily accented Standard. "Why are you here?" Elena knelt beside him and began scanning his injuries. "Because you need help," she said simply. The Zaphirian officer stared at her for a long moment, then slowly lay back down. We attacked your people. The patrol ship." "I know," Elena said as she began treating his wounds. "Right now, that doesn't matter. Right now, you're patients." For the next 3 hours, Elena and her team worked to stabilize the Zaphirian survivors and transport them to the Mercy's light. Not all of them could be saved. 15 had died before they arrived, and 3 more died despite their best efforts. But 29 Zaphirian soldiers would live because Elena had chosen to help them. As the last of the survivors were brought aboard, Elena stood on the bridge watching the dead Zaphirian cruiser drift away into space. She felt tired but satisfied. This was why she had become a doctor and why humanity had built ships like the Mercy's Light. In a galaxy torn apart by war, they offered something precious, hope that peace was still possible. She had no way of knowing that in less than 48 hours everything would change. She had no way of knowing that her act of mercy would soon be answered with an act of such cruelty that it would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Elena Vasquez believed in the goodness of intelligent beings, in the sacred nature of medical care, and in the power of compassion to overcome hatred. Soon she would learn how wrong she was. Admiral Thexkai of the Zaphirian Third Fleet stood in the command center of his flagship, the Vengeance of Scales. He was a massive creature, even by Zaphirian standards, with dark green scales that bore the scars of many battles. His yellow eyes burned with hatred as he watched the tactical display showing the human hospital ship. For weeks, Thexkai had been tracking the Mercy's light. The human vessel appeared wherever there was fighting, always claiming to offer medical aid to anyone who needed it. But Thexkai was convinced it was really a spy ship. How else could the humans always know where the battles were happening? How else could they arrive so quickly after each fight? The Admiral's second-in-command, Captain Vex Thul, approached carefully. Like all Zaphirians, she knew that Thexkai's temper was dangerous when he was angry. "Admiral, our sensors confirm that the hospital ship has rescued survivors from the Crimson Fang." "Of course they have," Thexkai hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "They rescue our wounded, treat them kindly, and then extract every piece of military information they can. The humans are clever, I will give them that. They use our own sense of honor against us." Captain Vexthul looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the survivors from the Crimson Fang have been listed as casualties. If the humans are treating them, then they are being turned into weapons against us." Thexkai slammed his clawed fist against the command console. "Don't you see? The humans claim to be healers, but they are really the most dangerous enemies we face. They make our own people trust them. They make the galaxy think we are the monsters for fighting back." The captain remained silent. She had served under Thexkai for 3 years and knew better than to argue when he was in this mood. The Admiral had always been suspicious of the human medical ships, but lately his paranoia had grown worse. He saw plots and conspiracies everywhere, especially involving the humans. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "the human ship is moving away from the battle site. They're heading toward the edge of the system." Thexkai studied the tactical display. The Mercy's light was moving slowly, probably because it was carrying wounded. This was his chance. For too long, these human medical ships had operated freely in Zaphirian space, gathering intelligence and turning rescued soldiers against their own people. Today, that would end. "Signal the fleet," Thexkai ordered. "All ships are to form attack formation. We will intercept the human vessel." "Sir," Captain Vexthul said carefully, "the human ship is protected by the laws of medical sanctuary. If we attack a hospital ship—" "What laws?" Thexkai snarled. "Laws written by our enemies to protect their spies? I recognize no laws that help humans infiltrate our territory." He turned to face his captain, his eyes burning with fanatical hatred. "The humans have made this war worse by their interference. They heal our enemies and study our weaknesses. Today, we show the galaxy what happens to those who oppose the Zaphirian Empire." The fleet began moving toward the Mercy's light. 12 heavy cruisers and 40 smaller ships, all armed with the most powerful weapons the Zaphirian military could build. Against them, the hospital ship had only basic defensive shields and no weapons at all. It would be a massacre. On the Mercy's light, Dr. Elena Vasquez was making her rounds through the medical bays. The Zaphirian survivors they had rescued were recovering well. Some were still suspicious of their human doctors, but others seemed amazed by the care they were receiving. One young soldier had even thanked Dr. Chen for saving his life. Elena paused at the bedside of the Zaphirian officer they had found first. His name was Lieutenant Coraval, and his injuries had been severe. Dr. Chen had spent 6 hours in surgery repairing damage to his internal organs. Now the reptilian soldier was awake and alert, though still weak. "How are you feeling?" Elena asked through the universal translator. Coraval looked at her with his large yellow eyes. I do not understand," he said slowly. "Why do you help us? We are your enemies." Elena had heard this question many times before. "In a medical bay, there are no enemies," she replied. "Only patients who need care. But my people, we have killed humans. I myself have fought against your ships. And tomorrow you might fight us again," Elena said honestly. But today you're hurt and we can help you. That's all that matters right now." Coraval was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke again. "On my world, they tell us that humans are weak and foolish. They say you cannot fight because you are afraid of death." Elena smiled sadly. "We're not afraid of death, Lieutenant. We're afraid of becoming the kind of people who stop caring about life." Before Coraval could respond, the ship's alarm system began blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the medical bay as the emergency broadcast started. "All hands to emergency stations. This is not a drill. All medical staff prepare for possible combat casualties. All patients remain in your beds." Elena felt her heart sink. Combat alerts on a hospital ship were rare and usually meant someone was threatening them. She headed quickly for the bridge, her mind racing through possibilities. Pirates sometimes attacked medical ships looking for valuable medicines, but they usually sent demands first. On the bridge, she found Commander Torres and the rest of the senior staff looking grim. The main view screen showed 12 large ships approaching in attack formation. "Zaphirian Third Fleet," Sarah reported. "They're coming straight for us at high speed. No response to our communications." Elena stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's impossible. We're a hospital ship. We're protected by sanctuary laws." "Apparently, Admiral Thexkai doesn't care about those laws," Dr. Chen said as he arrived on the bridge. "I've heard about him. He's been getting more extreme lately, claiming that all humans are spies and saboteurs." "How long until they reach us?" Elena asked. 20 minutes at their current speed, Lieutenant Park reported from the communications station. "I've been sending medical sanctuary codes on all frequencies, but they're not responding." Elena felt a cold fear growing in her stomach. The Mercy's light was completely defenseless against a military fleet. Their shields were designed to protect against asteroid impacts and radiation, not military-grade weapons. If the Zaphirians really intended to attack, there was nothing they could do to stop them. "Can we run?" she asked. "Not with a full load of patients," Sarah replied grimly. "We're carrying too much mass to outrun military ships, and if we try to accelerate too quickly, it could kill the more seriously wounded." Dr. Chen was studying the tactical display. "How many patients do we have aboard?" 15,412, Elena replied automatically. She always knew the exact count. "From 12 different species, including the Zaphirian survivors we just rescued." "Surely they won't attack knowing their own people are aboard," Lieutenant Park said hopefully. Elena wished she could believe that, but she had heard stories about Admiral Thexkai. He was known for sacrificing his own soldiers to achieve victory. He might even see killing the rescued Zaphirians as preventing them from being corrupted by human kindness. "Keep sending the sanctuary codes," Elena ordered. "Broadcast our patient. Manifest so they know we're carrying wounded from both sides. Maybe if they understand we're really a medical ship." "Incoming transmission," Park announced suddenly. "It's from the Zaphirian flagship." "Put it on screen," Elena said. The view screen flickered and showed Admiral Thexkai standing on his command bridge. His scarred face was twisted with hatred as he looked at the human crew. "Human vessel," he said in accented standard. "You are operating illegally in Zaphirian space. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Elena stepped forward. "Admiral Thexkai, I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Medical Officer of the hospital ship Mercy's Light. We are operating under the laws of medical sanctuary. We are not a military vessel and pose no threat to your forces." Thexkai's eyes narrowed. "You lie, human. Your ship is a spy vessel disguised as a medical facility. You gather intelligence on our fleet movements and pass it to your council allies." "That's not true," Elena protested. "We treat wounded from both sides equally. We have 29 of your own soldiers aboard right now, recovering from injuries. We saved their lives." "You have corrupted them with your propaganda," Thexkai snarled. "You make them weak and grateful to their enemies. This ends today." The transmission cut off, and Elena felt her world falling apart. She had devoted her life to helping others, to proving that compassion could exist even in wartime. Now she was face to face with someone who saw that compassion as an act of war. "Admiral," Sarah said quietly, "we need to evacuate the ship." Elena looked around the bridge at her crew. These people had followed her across the galaxy, risking their lives to save others. Dr. Chen had turned down a prestigious research position to serve on the Mercy's Light. Sarah had given up a promising military career to protect a hospital ship. They all believed in what they were doing. "How long would it take to evacuate all patients?" Elena asked. "With our current shuttle capacity," Sarah calculated quickly. 18 hours minimum, and that's assuming the Zaphirians give us time. "They won't," Elena said with certainty. She could see it in Thexkai's eyes. He wasn't planning to take prisoners or allow evacuations. He wanted to make a statement, to show the galaxy what happened to those who opposed him. Elena could see the Zaphirian ships clearly now on the main screen. They were beautiful in their way, sleek and deadly, built for war. The Mercy's Light must look like a fat, helpless target to them. Its white hull and red medical symbols probably just made Thexkai angrier. 30 seconds, Sarah reported. Elena opened another channel to the Zaphirian fleet. "Admiral Thexkai, I'm begging you to reconsider. We have children aboard, wounded soldiers from your own fleet, innocent civilians who have never hurt anyone. Please, in the name of everything civilized beings hold sacred, do not attack a hospital ship." There was no response. 10 seconds. "To weapons range," Sarah said. Elena held her breath, praying to whatever gods might be listening that even Admiral Thexkai would not cross this line. The laws of medical sanctuary had been respected for over 1,000 years. No civilized species had ever attacked a clearly marked hospital ship. It was unthinkable. The first missile struck the Mercy's Light amidships, tearing through the hull like paper. The ship's weak shields collapsed instantly under the assault. More missiles followed, along with particle beam strikes that carved burning holes through the medical bays. Elena was thrown from her chair as the bridge shook violently. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut automatically as atmosphere rushed out through the breaches. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by the red glow of emergency illumination. "Hull breaches on decks 5 through 12, someone shouted over the noise. "Medical Bay 7 is gone," came another report. Elena pulled herself to her feet, her ears ringing from the explosions. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to coordinate damage control, but she could see the despair in their eyes. They all knew this was hopeless. The second wave of attacks came 30 seconds later. This time, the weapons struck the pediatric ward. Elena felt something break inside her as she realized that Tommy Harrison and the young Altarian girl were probably dead. All those children, all those innocent lives snuffed out by a madman's hatred. Dr. Chen appeared at her side, blood running down his face from a head wound. "Elena, we have to evacuate the remaining patients. The ship won't survive another attack like that." "How many?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "We've lost contact with 8 medical bays. Best estimate is 7,000 casualties so far." 7,000 people dead in less than 2 minutes. Elena felt sick. These weren't soldiers who had chosen to fight. They were patients who had come seeking healing, staff members who had devoted their lives to helping others, and children who had never hurt anyone. The third attack concentrated on the ship's engines and power systems. The Mercy's Light went completely dark, except for battery-powered emergency lighting. In the medical bays, life support systems failed and wounded patients began dying from exposure to space. Elena tried to reach the ship's communication system, but it was dead. She couldn't even send a final message to warn other medical ships about what had happened. Admiral Thexkai was going to commit the greatest war crime in galactic history, and no one would know until it was too late. Commander Torres was working frantically at her damaged console. I'm reading massive power buildups on the Zaphirian ships, she reported. They're preparing for a final bombardment. Elena looked around the ruined bridge. Half her senior staff was dead or unconscious. The ship was dying around them, and there was nothing they could do to save it. In a few minutes, the Mercy's light would be nothing but debris, and the galaxy would have lost something precious. Proof that compassion could exist even in the darkest times. She thought about recording a final message, but what could she say? That they had tried to help and been murdered for it? That the laws of medical sanctuary meant nothing to a madman? That sometimes evil really did triumph over good? Instead, Elena activated the emergency beacon that would broadcast their final moments to any ship within range. If she was going to die, at least the galaxy would know what had really happened here. The final attack came like a hammer blow from the gods. Massive energy beams struck the ship from 6 different directions, tearing it apart piece by piece. The hull split open like a flower, spilling atmosphere and debris into space. Medical equipment, furniture, and bodies tumbled out into the void. Elena felt the deck beneath her feet give way. As she fell through the collapsing bridge, her last thought was of all the patients she had failed to save. The young Zaphirian lieutenant who had just begun to understand that humans weren't monsters. The children who had trusted her to keep them safe. The thousands of people who had believed that the laws of medical sanctuary would protect them. The Mercy's light died in flames and silence, taking with it the lives of over 8,000 innocent beings. In 5 minutes of pure evil, Admiral Thexkai had shattered something that had taken millennia to build. The galaxy's faith that some things were sacred, that some lines should never be crossed, that even in war, mercy was possible. The universe had just become a darker place. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every civilized world. In less than 6 hours, beings on thousands of planets knew about the destruction of the Mercy's light. The reaction was immediate and universal. Shock, horror, and outrage that something so unthinkable could have happened. On Altair Prime, the crystal-skinned Altarians gathered in their great meditation halls, their psychic voices joining in a song of mourning that could be felt across their entire star system. The Altarians had been among the first to create the laws of medical sanctuary nearly 2,000 years ago. To them, the attack on a hospital ship was not just a war crime, it was a wound in the very fabric of civilization. High Counselor. Zexathara stood before the Altarian Senate, her translucent skin glowing with barely controlled emotion. The Zaphirians have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, she said, her psychic voice carrying the pain of her entire species. They have taken something pure and destroyed it for no reason but hatred. This attack must be answered. On the rocky world of Goron, the massive stone-skinned beings who had built some of the galaxy's greatest engineering works gathered in their mountain cities. The Gorons were slow to anger, but when they did become angry, their rage could move planets. Elder Thokmar, whose body was carved from living granite, spoke for his people in a voice like grinding stone. The humans build ships to heal, he rumbled. The Zaphirians destroy ships that heal. This tells us everything we need to know about who is truly civilized in this war. Even among the machine minds of the Synthoid Collective, there was something approaching emotion. Their quantum processors struggled to understand how organic beings could deliberately destroy those who sought only to help others. To the logical Synthoids, the attack made no sense from any strategic perspective. It served no military purpose and would only unite the galaxy against the Zaphirians. But nowhere was the reaction stronger than in human space. On Earth, Luna, Mars, and the 43 human colonies, people watched the recordings of the attack with tears in their eyes and rage in their hearts. The Mercy's light had been humanity's gift to the galaxy, proof that they belonged among the stars not as conquerors, but as healers. Now it was gone, along with 8,000 innocent lives. In the halls of the Earth government on Luna, President Sarah Chen stood before an emergency session of the Colonial Assembly. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, but today she looked older than her 70 years. "Citizens of Earth and all human colonies," she began, her voice carried to every human world. "Today we have witnessed an act of evil that defies comprehension. The Zaphirian Empire has destroyed a hospital ship operating under the sacred laws of medical sanctuary. 8,000 beings are dead, including 1,500 humans who dedicated their lives to healing. Others." The president paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Many were weeping openly. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had happened. "For 3 years we have fought this war with restraint," President Chen continued. "We have limited our targets to military installations. We have treated prisoners with dignity. We have followed every law of civilized warfare. Today, the Zaphirians have shown us that they recognize no such laws. They are not a civilized enemy. They are monsters who destroy hospitals and murder healers." The president's voice grew harder. "Therefore, I am authorizing General Morrison to begin total mobilization of all human military forces. The gloves are coming off. If the Zaphirians want a war without rules, then that is what they will get." The vote to approve total war was unanimous. For the first time since humanity had reached the stars, every human world was united in purpose. The attack on the Mercy's light had awakened something in the human spirit that had been sleeping, a cold, calculating fury that would not rest until justice was served. But it was not the politicians or generals who would ultimately change the course of the war. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Dr. Kenji Nakamura sat in his private laboratory watching the news reports. He was a thin man in his 60s, with gray hair and tired eyes behind thick glasses. For most of his career, he had been one of humanity's leading experts in xenobiology, the study of alien life forms. Dr. Nakamura had worked on the Mercy's light during its early years, helping to develop medical treatments that could work on dozens of different species. He had left the ship to pursue theoretical research, but he had kept in touch with Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Chen. They had been his friends, his colleagues, his family in all the ways that mattered. More importantly, his daughter Lisa had been serving as a nurse aboard the Mercy's light. She was 28 years old, brilliant and compassionate, following in her father's footsteps by dedicating her life to helping others. The last message he had received from her was 3 days ago, a cheerful note about how they had rescued some Zaphirian soldiers and how proud she was to be part of humanity's mission of healing. Now Lisa was dead, murdered by the very people she had been trying to help. Dr. Nakamura sat in his laboratory surrounded by decades of research into alien biology. His computers contained detailed analyses of 37 different species, including complete genetic maps, physiological studies, and medical data. He had always used this knowledge to help alien patients, to find new ways to heal injuries and cure diseases. But as he stared at the reports of his daughter's death, Dr. Nakamura began to think about other uses for his research. He thought about how every species had unique biological vulnerabilities, specific genetic sequences that could be targeted. He thought about how his decades of healing could be turned into decades of harm. The idea horrified him at first. Dr. Nakamura had devoted his life to the principle that all intelligent life was precious, that science should be used to help rather than hurt. But as he watched the footage of Admiral Thexakai justifying the attack on the hospital ship, something cold and dark began growing in his heart. The Zaphirian admiral appeared on news broadcasts across the galaxy, his scarred face showing no remorse for what he had done. The human vessel was a legitimate military target, he claimed. It was gathering intelligence under the false protection of medical sanctuary. The Zaphirian Empire recognizes no laws that protect our enemies' spy operations. The interview made Dr. Nakamura sick with rage. Thexkai was not just refusing to apologize, he was claiming that the murder of 8,000 innocent people was justified. He was saying that Lisa had deserved to die because she was helping wounded soldiers regardless of their species. Dr. Nakamura stood up slowly and walked to his secure computer terminal. His research files were classified at the highest levels of human government. For good reason, the information contained within them could be weaponized in ways that would make nuclear bombs look gentle. He had always hoped that such weapons would never be necessary, that civilization would find better ways to resolve conflicts. Admiral Thexkai had just proven him wrong. The doctor's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up files he had not accessed in years. Zaphirian genetic structure, reptilian immune system vulnerabilities, specific protein sequences that existed only in Zaphirian DNA. All information he had gathered to help treat wounded Zaphirian patients, now being viewed through a very different lens. "Computer," he said quietly. "Begin analysis of targeted biological weapons applications for Zaphirian physiology." The computer hesitated. "Dr. Nakamura, that research is classified as prohibited under the Biological Weapons Convention." "Override." "Classification," Nakamura replied. "Authorization, Nakamura Alpha 77 Charlie." "Override accepted." Beginning analysis. For the next 72 hours, Dr. Nakamura did not sleep. He worked feverishly, his brilliant mind focused on a single goal: creating weapons that could kill Zaphirians while leaving other species completely unharmed. His decades of research into healing became decades of research into highly specific, targeted genocide. The weapons he designed were elegant in their horror. Airborne viruses that would target unique Zaphirian cellular structures, causing rapid organ failure. Genetic agents that could be introduced into food or water supplies, sterilizing entire populations. Neurological toxins that would shut down reptilian nervous systems while having no effect on mammalian, crystalline, or silicon-based life forms. Each weapon was designed to be completely harmless to every other known species in the galaxy. A human could be exposed to massive doses and experience nothing more than mild nausea. An Altarian could swim in a pool of the toxin without harm, but for Zaphirians, exposure would mean death within hours. On the fourth day, Dr. Nakamura received a visit from Admiral Rebecca Harrison of the Earth Defense Force. She was a career military officer, tough and practical, but she looked uncomfortable as she sat in the doctor's laboratory. "Dr. Nakamura," she began carefully, "we've been monitoring your research activities. Your computer access logs show some concerning patterns." "Concerning how?" Nakamura asked without looking up from his work. "You've been accessing classified biological data and running theoretical weapons simulations. Given your recent loss, we understand you're going through a difficult time, but what?" Nakamura finally turned to face her. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, and his hands shook slightly from too much caffeine and too little food. "But I should just accept that my daughter is dead? That 8,000 innocent people were murdered for the crime of being healers?" Admiral Harrison leaned forward. "Doctor, we all want justice for what happened to the Mercy's light, but biological weapons are exactly what we need." Nakamura cut her off. "Admiral, do you know how many humans will die if we fight this war conventionally? Millions. Tens of millions. The Zaphirians have bigger fleets, better weapons, and more soldiers. We can win eventually, but the cost will be enormous." He gestured to his computer screens, which showed complex molecular diagrams and genetic sequences. "But I can end this war in weeks. I can create weapons that will only kill Zaphirians. No human casualties. No civilian casualties on other worlds. Just the complete elimination of the species that thinks murdering hospital ships is acceptable." Admiral Harrison stared at the screens, her face pale. "Doctor, what you're describing is genocide." "Yes," Nakamura said simply. The same genocide they intended for us, except more efficient. They want to wipe out humanity because we're inferior. I can wipe out the Zaphirians because they're monsters." The Admiral was quiet for a long time, studying the research data. Despite her moral reservations, she could see the strategic implications. The weapons Dr. Nakamura was describing could indeed end the war quickly and with minimal human casualties. After the attack on the Mercy's Light, public opinion would probably support any action taken against the Zaphirians. "How long would it take?" she asked finally. "The basic research is done," Nakamura replied. 6 weeks to synthesize the first batch of weapons. Another month for testing and refinement. 3 months total to have deployable biological weapons that could eliminate the Zaphirian Empire as a threat. Admiral Harrison closed her eyes. In her 40-year military career, she had made many difficult decisions, but none like this. The attack on the hospital ship had crossed every line of civilized warfare. The Zaphirians had shown that they would target anyone and anything to achieve victory. Perhaps it was time to show them what humanity was capable of when truly provoked. "What do you need?" she asked. Dr. Nakamura smiled for the first time since learning of his daughter's death. It was not a pleasant expression. "A fully equipped biological research facility, a team of trusted assistants, and a guarantee that when these weapons are deployed, Admiral Thexkai will be the first to experience them." News of the biological weapons program was kept secret from the general public, but word spread quickly through the highest levels of human government and military command. The reactions were mixed. Some officials were horrified at the idea of genocide, while others argued that the Zaphirians had forfeited any right to mercy when they destroyed a hospital ship. The debate raged in classified meetings across human space. Philosophers argued about the morality of using such weapons. Military strategists calculated the potential benefits and risks. Politicians worried about how the galaxy would react if humanity became known as the species that created targeted biological weapons. But while the debates continued, Dr. Nakamura worked. Every day that passed was another day that human soldiers died fighting a conventional war against a superior enemy. Every week of delay meant more families destroyed, more colonies burned, more young people killed in battles that could be avoided if the Zaphirian Empire simply ceased to exist. The galaxy had recoiled in horror at the destruction of the Mercy's Light. Even species that were normally neutral in galactic conflicts had condemned the attack. Some Zaphirian client states had declared independence rather than be associated with such an atrocity. The Zaphirian Empire was becoming isolated, its only remaining allies those too weak or too dependent to break away. But isolation was not enough for Dr. Nakamura. Justice required more than diplomatic condemnation. Justice required that those who murdered healers be made to pay the ultimate price. Justice required that the species which thought hospital ships were legitimate targets be removed from the galaxy forever. In his laboratory on Europa, working 18 hours a day with a team of hand-picked scientists, Dr. Kenji Nakamura was preparing to give the galaxy exactly that kind of justice. The only question was whether humanity would have the courage to use the weapons he was creating. Soon, they would find out. 3 months after the destruction of the Mercy's Light, Dr. Kenji Nakamura stood in a secure briefing room deep beneath the Earth Defense Force headquarters on Luna. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human space: President Sarah Chen, Admiral Rebecca Harrison, Defense Minister James Wright, and a dozen other high-ranking officials. The air in the room was thick with tension. On the table before them sat a small metal case, no larger than a briefcase. Inside that case were vials containing the most dangerous weapons humanity had ever created. Each vial held enough biological agents to kill every Zaphirian on a planet within 72 hours, while leaving every other form of life completely unharmed. Dr. Nakamura looked older than his 63 years. The past months of intensive work had taken their toll on his body and mind. His hair had gone completely white, and deep lines creased his face, but his eyes burned with the cold fire of a man who had found his purpose in revenge. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to present. "I am here to offer you the complete destruction of the Zaphirian Empire." He opened the case, revealing 12 vials filled with clear liquid. Each vial was labeled with a different code name: Medusa, Nemesis, Retribution. To most people, they would look like ordinary medical samples. In reality, they contained the power to commit genocide on a galactic scale. These weapons target specific genetic sequences found only in Zaphirian DNA, Nakamura continued. They can be deployed as aerosols, introduced into water supplies, or delivered through food sources. Once released, they will spread through Zaphirian populations like wildfire. Death occurs within 6 to 24 hours, depending on the specific agent used. President Chen stared at the vials with a mixture of fascination and horror. "And they won't affect other species?" "Completely harmless to non-Zaphirians," Nakamura confirmed. "I've tested them on tissue samples from 17 different species. Humans, Altarians, Gorons, Synthoids, none show any negative reactions. The weapons are designed to target reptilian cellular structures that simply don't exist in other life forms." Defense Minister Wright leaned forward. "How many Zaphirians are we talking about? Total population?" "Approximately 4 billion across their empire," Admiral Harrison replied, consulting her data pad. "Spread across 12 worlds and hundreds of space stations and ships." "All of them?" President Chen asked quietly. "Men, women, children?" Nakamura's expression didn't change. "The weapons do not distinguish between combatants and civilians. They target Zaphirian biology, not Zaphirian behavior." "Yes, Madam President, all of them." The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. They were discussing the complete extinction of an intelligent species, something that had never been done deliberately in the history of galactic civilization. General Patricia Morrison, the highest-ranking military officer present, spoke up. "Doctor, walk us through the deployment scenarios. How would we actually use these weapons?" Nakamura activated a holographic projector, showing a three-dimensional map of Zaphirian space. "We have several options. The most efficient would be simultaneous deployment on all major Zaphirian worlds. Aerosol release in population centers would ensure maximum coverage. Within 1 week, the Zaphirian Empire would cease to exist." "What about their military forces in space?" Admiral Harrison asked. "More challenging, but not impossible," Nakamura replied. "We could introduce the agents into their food and water supplies during resupply operations. Alternatively, some of the weapons can survive in vacuum for limited periods. We could deploy them near Zaphirian fleet positions and let their ships' air circulation systems do the rest." Dr. Sarah Kim, the government's chief science advisor, raised her hand. "Dr. Nakamura, have you considered the long-term genetic effects? Could these weapons mutate to affect other species?" "Extremely unlikely," Nakamura replied. "The targeting mechanisms are highly specific. It would require multiple unlikely mutations for the weapons to become dangerous to non-Zaphirian life. And even if such mutations occurred, we have developed antidotes for most known species." President Chen rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the decision before them. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're asking us to authorize the complete extermination of the Zaphirian species." "I'm offering you the tools to end this war," Nakamura corrected. "What you do with those tools is your decision. But consider the alternatives. How many more human lives will be lost in conventional warfare? How many more hospital ships will be destroyed? How many more colonies will be burned?" The president looked around the table at her advisors. The war with the Zaphirians had been going badly for humanity. Despite joining forces with the Galactic Council, human casualties were mounting. 3 more human worlds had been attacked since the destruction of the Mercy's Light, and civilian casualties were in the millions. "What's the current military assessment?" she asked Admiral Harrison. The Admiral consulted her reports. Without some kind of game-changing advantage, we're looking at 3 to 5 more years of warfare. Estimated human casualties over that. Period. 15 to 20 million dead, 50 million wounded or displaced. That's just humans. Council forces are taking even heavier losses. And if we use Dr. Nakamura's weapons? The war ends within 6 months, Harrison replied. Human casualties for the final campaign, estimated at fewer than 10,000. The mathematics were stark. Use the biological weapons and save millions of human lives. Refuse to use them and watch humanity bleed to death in a prolonged, conventional war against a superior enemy. Defense Minister Wright voiced what everyone was thinking. After what they did to the Mercy's light? Do the Zaphirians deserve mercy? This isn't about what they deserve, President Chen replied. This is about what we can live with becoming. Dr. Nakamura's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. Madam President, with respect, my daughter Lisa is dead because we showed mercy to wounded Zaphirian soldiers. Dr. Vasquez is dead because she believed in the sacred nature of medical care. 8,000 innocent people are dead because they thought the laws of medical sanctuary meant something. He gestured to the vials. The Zaphirians have shown us what they really are. A species that sees compassion as weakness and uses our own morality against us. They don't want a war with rules. They want total victory, no matter how many innocents they have to kill. Why should we tie our hands with moral constraints they don't recognize? The debate continued for 6 hours. Arguments flew back and forth. Across the table, moral, strategic, practical, and philosophical. Some officials argued that using biological weapons would make humanity as monstrous as the Zaphirians. Others contended that the unique nature of the weapons, their species-specific targeting, made them morally acceptable. Dr. Kim raised concerns about setting precedents. If we do this, what's to stop other species from developing similar weapons? Against their enemies? We could be opening the door to biological warfare on a galactic scale. Other species already have such weapons, Nakamura replied coldly. The Altarians developed psychic viruses centuries ago. The Synthoids could release computer viruses that would shut down any technology-dependent civilization. The only reason these weapons haven't been used is because no one has been desperate enough. The Zaphirians have made us desperate. Admiral Harrison presented intelligence reports showing increasing Zaphirian brutality. They're not just targeting military installations anymore. Last week, they destroyed a civilian transport carrying refugees from the Tau Ceti colony. 2,000 people, including 800 children. They're making it clear that they consider all humans legitimate targets. President Chen listened to all the arguments, but her attention kept returning to the vials on the table. Such small things to hold such enormous power. A few liters of engineered biological agents that could end a war and save millions of lives. Or damn humanity's soul forever. Dr. Nakamura, she said finally, you've had 3 months to think about this. In your professional opinion, is there any other way to end this war quickly? Nakamura was quiet for a long moment. Conventional military victory is possible, but will take years and cost millions of lives. Negotiated peace is impossible. The Zaphirians see any compromise as weakness and will only use a ceasefire to prepare for renewed attacks. Targeted assassination of their leadership might work, but they have effective succession protocols. He looked directly at the president. Madam President, I have spent my entire career looking for ways to preserve life. I have studied every form of biology in the galaxy, searching for methods to heal and cure and save. These weapons represent the complete opposite of everything I've ever believed in. His voice grew harder. But the Zaphirians murdered my daughter and 8,000 other innocent people for the crime of showing mercy. They have forfeited any claim to the protection of civilized law. If we don't stop them now, decisively and permanently, they will continue killing until either they win or we are all dead. President Chen closed her eyes, trying to imagine explaining this decision to the voters, to history, to her own conscience. The use of biological weapons was forbidden by every treaty humanity had signed since reaching the stars. But those treaties had been written assuming that all parties would follow basic rules of civilized warfare. The destruction of the Mercy's light had changed everything. It had shown that the Zaphirians were not civilized enemies, but monsters who would target anyone and anything to achieve victory. Perhaps monsters deserved monstrous ends. If we authorized deployment, she asked, how quickly could it be carried out? 2 weeks for final preparations, Admiral Harrison replied. Our intelligence networks have identified the optimal targets on each Zaphirian world. Simultaneous strikes across their empire, coordinated to prevent any warning from reaching other planets. And after it's done, the Zaphirian Empire ceases to exist, Nakamura said simply. Their military collapses, their colonies surrender or declare independence, and the threat to human space ends permanently. President Chen looked around the table one more time. Every face reflected the same terrible knowledge. They were about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. They were about to transform humanity from a species that built hospital ships into a species that committed genocide. But the alternative was to watch millions more humans die in a war they might not win. Dr. Nakamura, she said quietly, prepare your weapons for deployment. Admiral Harrison, coordinate with our intelligence services for simultaneous strikes. Dr. Kim, I want monitoring protocols in place to ensure the weapons don't mutate or spread beyond their intended targets. She paused, the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to do something terrible, something that will haunt humanity for generations. But the Zaphirians have left us no choice. They wanted a war without rules. Now they're going to get one. As the meeting broke up, Dr. Nakamura carefully closed the case containing the biological weapons. In 2 weeks, those vials would be opened across Zaphirian space, and an entire species would begin dying. He felt no satisfaction at the prospect, only a cold sense of justice finally being served. His daughter Lisa had died, believing that compassion could overcome hatred. That mercy was stronger than vengeance. Soon, the galaxy would learn how wrong she had been. Sometimes, evil could only be stopped by becoming evil yourself. The devil's bargain was complete. Humanity had sold its soul for victory, and the price would be paid in Zaphirian blood. The first deployment of Dr. Nakamura's biological weapons came at 0600 hours Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday that would forever mark the end of innocence for humanity. The target was a Zaphirian military outpost on the world of Kethvar, a heavily fortified planet that served as the command center for Admiral Thexkai's Third Fleet. The weapon was delivered by a human intelligence operative who had spent 2 years building a cover identity as a food supplier to the military base. She introduced the biological agent into the base's water recycling system during a routine maintenance visit. The substance was odorless, colorless, and completely undetectable by standard Zaphirian screening equipment. Dr. Nakamura watched the operation from the command center on Luna, his eyes fixed on the real-time intelligence feeds from Kethvar. For 6 hours, nothing happened. The Zaphirian soldiers went about their duties normally, unaware that death was already flowing through their veins. Then the first soldier collapsed. Lieutenant Vexmore was reviewing supply requisitions when he felt a sudden burning sensation in his chest. The young Zaphirian tried to call for help, but his voice came out as a harsh whisper. Within minutes, his organs began shutting down one by one. He died convulsing on the floor of the supply depot, green blood foaming from his mouth. The second victim fell an hour later, then a third. By the end of the first day, 12,000 Zaphirian soldiers were dead or dying. The base's medical staff worked frantically to understand what was happening, but their treatments had no effect. The biological weapon attacked Zaphirian cellular structure at the genetic level, and there was no cure. Admiral Thexkai himself was among the victims. The monster who had ordered the destruction of the Mercy's light spent his final hours in agony, his body betraying him as his organs failed one by one. In his last moments, as consciousness faded and death approached, he finally understood what he had unleashed when he chose to murder healers. Dr. Nakamura felt no satisfaction as he watched the reports coming in from Kethvar. The weapon was working exactly as designed, killing only Zaphirians while leaving the base's small population of other species completely unharmed. Human prisoners held at the base walked out alive and healthy, stepping over the corpses of their captors. But as the death toll climbed into the thousands, Nakamura began to notice something that made his stomach turn. Among the dead were not just soldiers, but medical personnel, Zaphirian doctors and nurses who had been treating wounded soldiers, beings whose only crime was trying to heal others, just like his daughter Lisa had done. The parallel to the Mercy's light was impossible to ignore. The galaxy had been horrified when Admiral Thexkai murdered hospital ship staff. Now humanity was doing the same thing, killing medical personnel along with everyone else. The fact that it was happening as a side effect rather than a deliberate target made no difference to the dead. News of the biological attack spread quickly through Zaphirian space. The survivors from Kethvar carried terrifying reports of a plague that killed only their species. Panic spread through the Zaphirian Empire as people realized that humanity had developed weapons that could exterminate them completely. The Zaphirian High Command's first response was disbelief. The idea that any species would create such weapons seemed impossible. Biological warfare had been banned by Galactic Treaty for over 1,000 years. Even the most ruthless military leaders had never crossed that line. But as more attacks followed over the next week, disbelief turned to terror. Human agents struck at military bases, government installations, and fleet positions across Zaphirian space. The weapons were deployed with surgical precision, targeting only areas with significant military value. But the effect was devastating. Within 10 days, the Zaphirian military had lost 30% of its personnel. Entire fleets found themselves without crews as the biological agents spread through their ships' life support systems. Planets that had been strongly defended became helpless as their garrisons died en masse. High General Korthrak, the supreme commander of Zaphirian forces, called an emergency session of the military council. Of the 25 generals who should have attended, only 12 were still alive. The others had been killed in the biological attacks or had died when the weapons spread to nearby civilian areas. "We cannot fight an enemy who can kill us with invisible poisons," General Korthrak declared, his voice shaking with fear and rage. "These humans have become monsters worse than any we ever imagined. They do not seek victory. They seek our complete extinction." The surviving generals debated their options. Some called for immediate surrender before the biological weapons could spread further. Others demanded a final, desperate assault on human space, using every weapon at their disposal to take as many humans with them as possible. But their debate was interrupted by horrifying news from the civilian sectors. The biological weapons had begun to spread beyond their intended military targets. On the world of Zeftar Prime, the weapons had contaminated the water supply of a major city. 3 million civilians were dead or dying, including children who had never heard of the war, elderly beings who had lived their entire lives in peace, and families who had only wanted to live quietly. The images that reached the galactic news networks were beyond description. Entire city blocks filled with corpses. Hospitals overflowing with victims that doctors could not save. Children crying beside the bodies of their parents, not understanding why everyone they loved was dying. Dr. Nakamura watched these reports in his laboratory on Europa, and for the first time since beginning his work, he felt the crushing weight of what he had done. He had created these weapons to stop a war and save human lives. He had told himself that the Zaphirians deserved extinction for their crimes. But looking at images of dead children, he realized that revenge was not the same as justice. The galactic reaction was swift and universal. Every major species condemned the use of biological weapons, even those who had supported humanity's war effort. The Altarians, who had been among humanity's strongest allies, issued a statement calling the attacks an abomination that shames all intelligent life. The Goron Assembly declared that humanity had fallen into darkness deeper than any cave. Even the logical synthoids calculated that the use of species-specific biological weapons represented an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. Most damaging of all was the reaction from the Galactic Council itself. Emergency sessions were called on every member world, and the debates that followed were bitter and divisive. Many council members began to question whether humanity was really any better than the Zaphirians they were fighting. Councillor Mex Thera of the Altarian Federation spoke for many when she addressed the emergency assembly. "We welcomed humanity to the council because they showed us something we had lost: the ability to care for others regardless of species or politics. The hospital ships they built were proof that peace was possible even in wartime. Now they have perverted that same knowledge into weapons of genocide. How can we trust beings who can transform healing into horror so easily?" On Earth, public opinion was divided. Many humans celebrated the biological attacks as just revenge for the destruction of the Mercy's light. They argued that the Zaphirians had started the cycle of atrocities and deserved whatever happened to them. But others were horrified by what humanity had become. Protests erupted in major cities across human space. Religious leaders condemned the biological weapons as morally indefensible. Scientists who had initially supported the war effort now spoke out against the use of their research for genocide. Dr. Maria Santos, who had worked with Dr. Nakamura years earlier, published an open letter that was broadcast across human space. "We became doctors to save lives, not to take them. We studied alien biology to help our patients, not to destroy entire species. Kenji Nakamura has taken everything we learned about healing and turned it into the most terrible weapon in galactic history. He has made us all complicit in genocide." But the weapons program continued. President Chen and her advisors had committed to total victory, and they saw no turning back. More biological agents were deployed across Zaphirian space, targeting both military and industrial installations. The death toll climbed into the millions. The Zaphirian Empire's collapse accelerated rapidly, with their military gutted and their civilian population dying. They could no longer maintain control over their territory. Client species that had served the Empire for generations declared independence. Colony worlds surrendered to human forces rather than face biological attack. Within 6 weeks of the first deployment, the Zaphirian High Command made a desperate decision. They would seek immediate peace negotiations, offering complete surrender in exchange for an end to the biological warfare. General Korthrak himself traveled to a neutral station in Altarian space to meet with human representatives. The negotiations were brief and one-sided. The Zaphirians agreed to every human demand: complete military disarmament, war reparations, the trial of surviving war criminals, and the dismantling of their empire. In exchange, humanity agreed to stop using biological weapons and provide medical aid to surviving Zaphirian populations. Admiral Thexkai, the architect of the Mercy's Light massacre, was already dead from the biological weapons. But the Zaphirian government agreed to posthumously strip him of all honors and declare him a war criminal. It was a hollow gesture, but it was all they could offer. The war was over. Humanity had achieved total victory in less than 4 years of fighting, with minimal human casualties in the final campaign. But the cost of that victory was becoming clear as the galaxy struggled to process what had happened. Dr. Nakamura returned to his laboratory on Europa as the peace treaties were being signed. The work that had consumed him for months was finished. The weapons he had created had served their purpose. The Zaphirian Empire was gone, and his daughter's death had been avenged. But victory felt hollow. In creating weapons that could kill specific species, he had opened a door that could never be closed. Other civilizations were already beginning their own biological weapons programs, terrified that they might face the same fate as the Zaphirians if they ever came into conflict with humanity. Worse, the galaxy's trust in humanity had been shattered. The species that had built hospital ships and preached the value of all intelligent life had revealed itself capable of genocide when pushed too far. Trade agreements were canceled. Diplomatic. Missions were recalled. Human space became increasingly isolated as other species decided that association with humanity was too dangerous. In the months that followed the war's end, Dr. Nakamura made a final decision about his life's work. Working alone in his laboratory, he systematically destroyed all research related to biological weapons. Computer files were wiped, physical. Samples were incinerated, and genetic sequences were deleted from every database. When he was finished, he recorded a final message. "My name is Dr. Kenji Nakamura, and I am responsible for the biological weapons that ended the Zaphirian War. I created these weapons to avenge my daughter's death and save human lives. I succeeded in both goals, but the price was higher than I ever imagined. I have destroyed all research related to these weapons. The knowledge of how to create them dies with me. I will not allow my work to be used again by humanity or any other species. Some discoveries are too dangerous to exist. The galaxy is right to fear us now. We have shown that humans can be the most compassionate species in the galaxy, or the most terrifying. We built hospitals to heal the universe, and then we built weapons to kill it. We are capable of both absolute good and absolute evil. I hope that future generations will choose to be healers rather than destroyers. But I fear that my legacy has made that choice much harder." Dr. Nakamura was never seen again after recording that message. Some say he retreated to a remote colony world to spend his remaining years in isolation. Others believe he took his own life, unable to live with what he had done. The truth was never discovered. The galaxy that emerged from the Zaphirian War was a darker, more fearful place. Humanity had saved itself and achieved total victory over its enemies. But in doing so, they had revealed something terrible about themselves, that their capacity for mercy was matched only by their capacity for merciless destruction. Other species began developing their own targeted biological weapons, leading to an arms race that would define galactic politics for generations. The laws of medical sanctuary were strengthened and expanded, but everyone knew they were only as strong as the conscience of those who might violate them. The ruins of the Mercy's Light still drifted in space near Kepler 442b, a monument to humanity's lost innocence. Sometimes human ships would change course to pass near the wreckage, their crews standing in silence as they remembered what they had once been. Dr. Elena,